Good evening and welcome to Wethersfield Talk. I'm Rick Gary and I'll be your host for this evening's episode. We have another guest with us tonight from Wethersfield, another great guest. Tonight we have State Representative Amy Morrin Bello of the 28th House District with us tonight to talk about what's going on at the Capitol. Amy, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Rick. Thank you for having me.
Well, no problem. Thank you for coming on. Again, I say this every week that we're so happy to have people come on and use Wethersfield Television to, just to disseminate information to the town.
Absolutely.
To let people know what's going on. So Amy, like I start with most of my guests, I'd like to give you a minute or so just to introduce yourselves. A lot of people may not know who you are, where you're from, and just a little bit about you.
Sure, I'm happy to start with that. So I am in my first term as a state representative.
Okay.
I have lived in Wethersfield my entire life. Rich and I have 3 children and we decided to raise them here. They are all in school, although this is the first time in 18 years I don't have someone in the Wethersfield public school system. We finally aged out of the public school system.
That's great.
And I also have my parents and my in-laws. They're all retired and they're living in their homes in Wethersfield too. So we have 3 generations.
So you're a true Wethersfield resident.
I really, really am.
And you started on the town council or board of ed?
Well, even before that, I was the assistant town clerk in Wethersfield for 10 years. So I actually got my start in local government.
Yep.
And from there, I went to Wesleyan University, where I'm an administrative assistant for the Center for African American Studies.
Okay.
And once I was no longer working for the town, that's when I got involved in politics.
Okay.
So in 2015, I served on the town council, and then I was the mayor for 2 years as well.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
And then you went on to bigger and better things and ran for statewide office.
Definitely bigger. Sometimes it's better. You know, all government is local government.
Sure. And how long have you? This is now 2 years.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Because your term is coming up.
Right.
And you will be running for election. You are running for election again in November.
I am. Yeah, it's already started. It starts earlier and earlier, so already out door knocking.
Excellent.
But the actual term is in January. We get sworn in January if we win the election in November.
Okay, excellent. So there's always a lot happening, obviously, at the Capitol.
Absolutely.
And where we tend to focus local sometimes, but there's a lot of statewide issues and that may not affect us directly. And then there's our local issues that may affect us a little more that we hear about. But I know there's some big ones, and we'll start with the biggie that everyone loves to talk about, our taxes. Right? So we did have a tax decrease of sorts this year, correct?
Absolutely. We had a big budget surplus,
right,
and we were able to cut taxes in certain areas, and especially between COVID and the inflation. It was something that was important to all the legislators up at the Capitol.
Okay.
We realized the struggle that families were having, that seniors were having.
Sure.
And not everybody realizes, but in Wethersfield, 30% of our population is considered ALICE, Asset Limited Income Constraint Employed.
Wow.
So they're working people who are struggling. And a lot of the things that we did, we were aiming for our middle-class families and how we can help them recover from the pandemic and now in inflation. So we had a child tax credit. It doesn't apply to me and you because
our kids are
too old.
But
for families that had children 18 and under, you could apply and receive $250 per child, up to 3 children. It's not a loan that you have to pay back at the end of the year. It's a rebate. And it was for families, family under $200,000 a year, or a single person under $100,000 a year. So there were income guidelines for that. One of the other big things we did was we capped the motor vehicle property tax.
Right.
Now, one thing you have to realize is Connecticut's a small state, but it's very diverse.
Right.
And so I'm up at the Capitol, and I'm advocating for what's good for Wethersfield.
Right.
Some of my colleagues were not advocating for this cap. their property taxes were going to fall below
Right.
the cap.
The
So
cap.
there wasn't a benefit for them.
Right.
But in Wethersfield, our mill rate is 41.08.
Yes.
And the gas cap tax was 32.46.
Okay.
So there was definitely a savings there
Right.
for your motor vehicle taxes. Now, I've heard from people that they didn't realize as much savings as they wanted. And part of that is that because of COVID, because of the supply chain issues,
Right.
it's really driven up the value,
The value. Right.
of cars.
But I tell people, you may not have seen a big decrease, but you would have seen a larger increase.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
It did stay that off a little bit.
Right, right. And I actually did see a decrease
Okay.
in my tax bill for my motor vehicles,
Good.
Personally, and I was thrilled to see that.
But sometimes you make these decisions as a state legislator representing Wethersfield, but you have to think about the state overall.
Absolutely.
And in cities like Hartford, where it's becoming almost impossible to live, they need these kind of,
Sure.
to get people to live in the city.
Right.
And help the city out.
Right.
So,
And we as a state are going to be investing millions of dollars in expanding broadband and providing it to
Right.
communities that don't have
They
it.
don't have
Well, that doesn't really benefit Wethersfield because we
Right.
have that right
Sure.
now. But like you said, we have to make sure everybody in the state does. It's not
Exactly.
enough just to make sure Wethersfield
Right.
has that broadband.
well, and ultimately, when the whole state does well, it helps all the towns, right? Because it takes the burden
Yep.
off the other towns.
Yeah, for sure.
So
There were a couple other things
Yeah,
we did.
Sure.
We have the gas tax holiday,
Okay.
and we have free public bus transportation. Now, I live on Hartford Avenue,
Right.
and I see the bus coming up and down Hartford Avenue
Right.
and Jordan Lane and Silestine. So it's really a benefit, again, to Wethersfield residents who do
Right.
take that bus.
Okay.
And that service is free until the end of November,
Okay.
and the gas tax holiday runs until the end of November.
Now, and these holidays and tax breaks and free bus, that's a COVID-related,
It's a temporary measure to
pandemic-related,
ease
yes.
some of the burden
Okay.
from the pandemic. Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, good.
Yep. And before we move on to another topic, I don't want to forget the seniors, because we do have a lot of seniors in the state of Connecticut,
Yes, we
and
do.
living is expensive because they aren't earning salaries and
Right. On a
getting
fixed income with their social
getting
security
raises.
or.
Right,
yeah.
right. So we did phase out the state income tax on pensions and annuities.
Oh, wow.
And so that's a benefit
Sure.
to our seniors.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So we
Well,
have, we do, when we look at budgeting and we look at savings, and we do try to look at not just one segment of our population, but how we can help as many people as possible.
Right. Well, and again, that's one of the I don't want to say problems, but when you're a legislator, especially at a local level like this, and your Wethersfield residents are telling you things, sometimes you can't always do exactly what they want because the whole state is, there's legislators, how many, 400?
153, yeah.
153, I'm thinking of the federal.
Representatives, House.
But there's
House.
153 people all doing the same thing for their cities.
Absolutely, and not even within Wethersfield, I will have somebody come up to me and tell me, you really need to do this. And the next day, someone else comes up to me and said, you should never do this. And it's the same thing.
Right.
So even within a community, there are
Right.
varying, ideas of
Sure.
what's appropriate, what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing.
Right.
In politics and even in government,
Right.
when I worked at the town too, you have to have thick skin because you're never
Yes.
going to make everybody happy, and
Well,
you
it's
have to
impossible.
realize that.
It's impossible.
Absolutely.
Well, if you're a parent, you know that anyway.
That's true too. It's true too.
So another thing I want to, and I'm sure there's a lot of things you want to talk on, but the only thing I kind of want to talk about was that there was a crime bill that passed, correct?
Yep.
Because crime is obviously on everybody's minds with
sure.
the car break-ins becoming more prevalent, and it just happened in my neighborhood a couple days ago. So what happened with this crime bill? What exactly did we get?
So before COVID started, I'm gonna preface a lot
Sure.
of my comments with COVID, but before COVID started, crime was at an all-time low in the state of Connecticut. We were doing very well, and even during COVID, a lot of crime remained low.
Right.
But this area of ransacking cars, breaking into cars, and
Right.
stealing catalytic converters, there was definitely an escalation in suburbs.
Right.
So it was something that we saw. It was on our radar. The police we're working on it too. Now, when COVID first hit, schools were not in session.
Right.
Courts were not in session.
Yeah, a lot of court got delayed.
Right, and the police were not making as many stops as they normally did.
Right.
And all of that was to safeguard people's
Sure.
health. But it allowed youth and adults as well to take advantage of that.
Right.
And the fact that there were more cars home in driveways.
Yes,
You know,
people weren't going anywhere.
They weren't at work, right. Exactly. So we did see an uptick in that type of crime. So we worked both sessions to make some changes to it.
Right.
Again, our goal was not to incarcerate our youth.
Right.
The best thing we can do is find diversionary programs and get to the root. You know, why are they stealing cars?
Right.
My 3 daughters were home for a while during COVID, but had different safety nets in place where, you know, they weren't out doing things they shouldn't be doing. So really looking at the root cause of it and addressing that. But some of the things that we did in this last session was we made it easier for the police to hold someone in order to get them before a judge.
Oh, okay.
Because if you, the police can, in certain instances, decide that a juvenile should not be let back out or released to a parent.
Okay.
And we had only allowed them a certain amount of time to go before a judge, so we've expanded that time so they have an easier chance of getting before a judge with a child. We also are allowing for electric monitoring of youth who have committed
repeat
crimes. Exactly. And another thing is the police were working in a silo when it came to juvenile records. So if a juvenile committed a crime in Wethersfield, Newington or New Britain or Rocky Hill wouldn't necessarily know that. There wasn't a database like there is for adult offenders.
Okay.
So we're working on allowing the different police departments to receive that information, because certainly a youth who's picked up in Wethersfield the next day is picked up in Hartford or in Rocky Hill, there's something going on with that youth that needs to be dealt with in a different way than a first time.
And before that, that information wouldn't have been shared.
Right. So there's that. And then I'm trying to think what else we have. I told you about the hold. I have to have notes because we had
there's a lot going
so many
on.
bills. We passed so many bills this session to keep track of everything.
Well, while you're thinking of that, I'm just going to say, and I have to say this, we've had the chief on in the past, and you know, obviously we want to stop this crime from happening. Nobody wants to feel nervous about having this happen to them.
Right.
But I have to say again, this is my public service announcement, do not leave your keys in the car. The chief told me, everyone's told, I've talked to other law enforcement, it's over 90% of the cars that are stolen with the keys in the car.
Right. The cars we drive now.
Yes, with the key fobs.
Right.
Yes.
It's easier to forget your keys in the car.
Right.
Also, though, don't leave valuables in the car.
Right.
There was an incident over the weekend where somebody's car window was smashed in to get
something,
purse that was sitting on the seat. So you're right.
And we're not justifying the crime. We're just saying let's make it harder. Don't make it easy.
Right.
That's all.
Lock your car and don't leave valuables in it. But we also started local task forces.
Okay.
And there's one in the Hartford region that has been successful. And then the other thing we did was we made it harder to sell for the resale of catalytic converters.
Right.
Right. I mean, how crazy is it that somebody could go into a parking lot, steal 30 catalytic converters, go to a scrap metal yard, and turn them all in and get cash for them
without a red flag going up.
Exactly.
Right.
So we've made that harder, that process harder. Now, when you go to turn in a catalytic converter, if you can't show the car that it came from, you have to show photo ID. They take a picture of your photo ID. They take a picture of your car license, so that we have a record of who is bringing these in.
Oh, good.
So we're trying to deter the theft of catalytic converters.
Excellent. And again, you can only do so much, but these are the little things you can do So I'm glad that at least something's being done.
Right, and it's very
Right.
important that we live in a safe community.
Oh, absolutely.
And everybody should be able to park their car in their driveway or in a parking lot
Right.
and not have to worry about it.
I agree.
I 100% agree.
Good. So what other, I mean, I have a couple things, but you're the guest. What are some topics you'd like to cover?
Well, some of the other things that I had just made some notes on, our big bill was our children's mental health bill.
Okay.
And, I didn't know this before I was at the legislature, but, the bills get numbers.
Right.
And a priority bill will be House Bill, 5001, Senate Bill 1. And both the House and the Senate made priorities of children's mental health.
Oh, good.
So they were the Senate bill number 1 and House bill. Because again, during COVID,
Right.
we
A
saw,
lot of issues.
we really did. We saw a big increase in mental health need.
Right.
And we just didn't have the providers. We didn't have the acute care that was needed.
Right.
And, children were not in school. They were learning from home, so they
Right.
didn't have the support of
You don't have a
school
teacher
staff.
seeing them every day,
Absolutely.
noticing something or
Right.
being there as a
Right.
watchdog.
Yes. So we've put in funding
Okay.
to increase staffing at schools.
Okay.
Schools need to have social workers. They need to have
Right.
school
Right.
psychologists. And they need to be trained with teachers and nurses to identify
Right.
when a child, has some needs.
Okay.
Because especially little children don't always tell you
Sure.
that something's wrong. We are also working at bringing in more people. We need more social workers. We need more psychologists.
This is a problem all over the country, though.
Absolutely.
There's a shortage of workers.
Absolutely.
Right.
Right. And one of the things we can do is allow licensing to, a Massachusetts
Oh,
license to work
okay.
in Connecticut or New York license to work in
Oh,
Connecticut.
that's a good
As
idea.
long as the requirements
Yes.
are similar.
Right.
So that's a bill that, I'm hoping comes before us in the next session. But like I said, we've been funding things, positions,
Sure.
centers in schools,
Right.
more beds in hospitals. Telehealth was very big during COVID.
Sure.
And we're continuing to allow people in the state of Connecticut to
Good.
use telehealth services.
And you can use
too.
telehealth for mental health.
For mental health, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's actually a big positive.
It's wonderful, especially
Yeah.
for people who aren't able to get out.
Right.
There's a lot more access with the telehealth.
Well, it's also more comfortable. Sometimes people, especially if you're going through a tough time, to go out and get in the car and go face to face to someone where it may be a little more
Sure.
less pressure,
Yeah,
easier to do it over
absolutely.
the computer or
Yeah. And I think having this conversation
Right.
at the state level, saying it's okay to talk about mental health.
Yes.
The
The stigma of mental health is starting to
Absolutely.
erode where
Absolutely.
we can actually have a discussion about it.
Right, and we need to have more discussions about
Right.
it. Everybody needs to be okay with the idea
Right.
that people are struggling. If you have a cold, you go to a doctor.
Yeah.
We
if you're
should
having-
not stigmatize mental health
agree.
either.
Well, that's good. So we did have some progress in that bill, which is good. And you're looking
Absolutely.
for more.
Yes, definitely,
Great.
definitely. We need to expand, we need
Yeah.
to expand services, and we need to make sure that health insurance is paying for it too, because
Yes.
what good is the service?
If you can't afford it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So are the insurance companies starting to, I believe they are starting to accept more
Sure, and-
mental health payment.
Right, and you have to have the providers
Right.
being willing to accept
To
the
accept
health
them.
insurance too, because it's a difficult process and it's
Right.
a timely process. If I go to see a clinician who doesn't take health insurance, I have
Right.
to give them a check or
Right.
give them cash there.
Right.
They receive their payment. When that clinician is working through an insurance company,
Right.
they're not receiving
No.
the money in hand.
And they may
It's
be
process.
a negotiated fee.
Absolutely.
So you're right. So getting their providers in on it is
Right.
important.
Right, and making sure people are working in network,
Right.
because most insurance companies now have different networks set up.
Yes.
So you want to find a provider that's in your network, that's geographically,
Right.
close to you. So there's a lot to consider
There's a lot to
when
it.
you're looking at doctors.
Oh my
and,
goodness. Yeah.
you know,
But again, this is where the state comes in, where you may have to passed legislation forcing providers or forcing insurance companies,
Yeah, well, we definitely have to
you have to
work with them.
them, but sometimes you've got to push them a little.
Sure, sure.
You know,
I mean, look at the rate increases that the insurance companies
yes.
were looking at this
Yeah.
year. I mean, 20%. It's really, really
that's tough.
outrageous. Yeah, that was just way too big a number.
Right, right.
Yep.
Well, that's a good thing. I know another issue that's close to you that you work on is environmental issues.
Sure. I was proud to receive an A rating from the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters.
Excellent.
They rate us based on our votes on environmental initiatives that come up during a session. And I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but I feel like we can never do enough in the realm of environment.
Oh, I agree.
And, it can't just be Connecticut. It can't just be the United States. It's really a
It's
global
world.
crisis.
Absolutely.
It's a global crisis.
Right.
And we are creatures of comfort.
Yes.
We are used to driving in our car. We, we don't hang clothes on the line. We throw them in a dryer.
Right.
All of these things impact our environment.
Right.
I can't remember the last time I rode a public bus or took a train because of living in a suburb. It's just easier and more convenient to drive in your car.
Oh, sure.
So I think we have to somehow work to change our mindsets and make sure we're doing what we can individually as well as a state and a country. But we are working towards goals. Some of them seem so far off.
Yeah, it's hard to think so far ahead.
It is.
It's such an issue that's so big.
Right. We want to have zero greenhouse gases by 2040. 2040 is almost 20 years away.
I know. Right.
But we need to find renewable energy sources. We need to pay for the infrastructure. We need to build them, and we need to reinforce our electric grid. And all of that takes huge amounts of money and a lot of time. So
it's a big commitment.
Time keeps ticking by, and I think, oh my gosh, we're never doing enough for what we need to do. And we did do a lot with electric vehicle, trying to build out that infrastructure. We have rebates for people who want to buy cars. We've made it easier for people who live in apartment complexes to put in the EV charging stations. We're committed to installing them on state buildings and property.
Sure.
But that's just such a small.
That's just one piece of the puzzle, right?
Right.
And there's so much more that needs to be done.
Right.
I mean, if you think about environmental, there's agriculture is one of the big emitters of emissions, so we have to work on that. The cars, the factory, you name it.
Right. I mean, what are we going to do with trash?
Right.
Our Mira plant is.
Oh, that was another question I had for you. Thanks for bringing that up.
Well, we have to decide where. I mean, right now we're going to be shipping trash out of state. We need to figure out what to do with our trash.
Right.
And that's something that we'll have to look at in the future because we haven't made decisions yet.
No.
It's probably something that should have been looked at and decided 10 years ago.
Right.
While the plant was still up and running.
Right.
Now we're in
that position where we have to do something.
Absolutely.
So we have to do a short-term fix, but hopefully, we're looking at a long-term fix.
Right. Yeah.
So what other great things have the legislators been busy doing? Well, I know there was another one. There was a minimum. So Connecticut is one of the states that is raising the minimum wage.
Yes. Yep.
Right?
That happened before I got to the Capitol, though.
But there's a plan. It's a graduated increase that's already in place, right?
Right.
So it'll go up either every year.
Right.
Or
we're at $14 an hour now. It's going to go up to $15 an hour, and that's where it will.
That's where it'll cap.
That's where it'll cap for now. We'll see what happens in the future. But
Good.
that was enacted several years ago, and every year we see that increase.
Good.
Good. But of course, it's not keeping up with inflation, is it?
No. People look at it. We have to stop thinking like when we were growing up. Minimum wage is what a 16-year-old kid made working at the grocery store,
Absolutely.
Right? Just to make extra cash. Well, that's people work full-time jobs at minimum wage.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the thing that we don't see. It's not just for teenagers working after school.
Right, and unfortunately, those people working 40 hours a week, making minimum wage, are not able to afford
Right.
rent and health insurance, the food,
Exactly.
their utilities in the state of Connecticut.
And the historic, if you look at historically what minimum wage is, we are so far behind when you look at, you know, inflation and everything that,
Absolutely.
you know, decades of no increase in minimum wage.
Sure.
Right?
We can talk about lots of things like that. Look at how higher ed, how tuition at colleges, how disproportionate that is to
Right.
our wages and
Exactly.
salary. The housing market, how much housing has gone up
Right.
versus our salary and
salaries.
wages as
I
well.
know.
Yeah, those are all, you know, important conversations to have, because we want people to be able to live and
Sure.
to support themselves and support their families.
So I'm getting the we're almost there sign. We're
The
getting
wrap it
close.
up sign.
So if there's another, well, if there's something else you wanted to mention before we go.
So I would say two quick things.
Yep.
I serve on the Transportation Committee, Government Administration and Elections Committee, and the Internship Committee. And on GAE, Government Administration and Elections, we met today to finalize the language for the, we have a referendum question on the ballot. And so in November, when you go to vote, the first question on the ballot will be, do you support, and I'm paraphrasing this, do you support early voting?
Oh, okay.
So we are trying to put forth early voting. It has to change our Constitution. So it's a constitutional amendment. That's why it had to pass through the House and Senate 2 different times, and then it'll be a question on the ballot for the voters to decide.
So did it pass?
Yes, so we've passed the House and Senate in 2019 and 2021, so it's ready to go on the ballot.
Okay, good.
So today our committee talked about the explanatory text.
Right.
So it'll be a piece of paper that explains what this
this does.
resolution does.
Okay.
So when you're going to the polls to vote, make sure you look for that question.
Right.
And then, of course, Wethersfield will have its own question, the referendum on the
the schools.
renovations of elementary schools.
Okay.
And our elementary schools are old and they're worn, and they need to be renovated. So I'm happy to see this question is also being put forth to the voters. Let the voters decide, you know, if that's important to them too.
Is that early voting referendum the only question that will be on the statewide?
Yes,
So that's
statewide.
statewide,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, and then towns will have
All their own.
whatever they have for questions. So,
Okay.
you know, I'm here to talk to people. Part of my job is my engagement with constituents.
Okay.
So I always tell people, call me, email me. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm happy to help advocate for you if you have a problem. We did a lot of that during COVID. So please reach out to me. I have great staff. They help, they help prepare all of
your
my.
flyers
I have
and,
flyers. I have bookmarks. I have pamphlets. They help prepare all this,
And
they
I get
help.
your weekly email, so I know what's
Fantastic.
going on.
That's great too.
Yeah.
So reach out to me if you have a question, if you have a problem. I'm always happy to help. If I don't have the answer, I work with my staff and we work with our state agencies to get the answer. You might not like it, but we work to get you the answer.
Well, as long as you're answering.
Yes.
Like I say, you can't always give everybody
Right.
the answer they want.
Right.
And you are up for election in November, so
I
you
am.
will also be
On the ballot.
ballot,
That's right.
going
That's
up for
right.
election in November
Yes.
for your second
Yes.
term.
Yeah.
Well, Amy, I want to thank you for coming on the show, being here to talk to everyone in Wethersfield, or almost everyone in Wethersfield. Not everybody's in the 28th district.
No,
But
no.
as a state rep, you're representing everyone.
I do, and
So-
if you live in Wethersfield and you send me an email or you call me,
Yeah.
I will reply to your email and answer your question, even if you're not in my district.
Okay.
And then if it's something that needs really a lot of work, then I will get in touch with Carrie Wood, who's the state rep for the other part of Wethersfield, and we'll make sure that you get passed over to her and her staff so she can get you that help.
Good. Well, again, thank you for coming on the show,
It's my pleasure.
and we hope to have you back soon.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching Wethersfield Talk. I'm sure we'll be back with more episodes. And if you have any comments or questions, or know someone that you would like to see on the show interviewed, get a hold of Wethersfield Television at WCTV14.com. Am I right about that? You can find us. Just Google Wethersfield Community Television and get a hold of us. Again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.